The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Danny Carter had ever seen in his life. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see it, and the walls seemed to go on forever in every direction. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, creatures from planets Danny had only read about in books. Some had scales, others had fur, and many looked so strange that Danny couldn't even figure out what they were made of. Danny stood in the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. His sneakers made squeaking sounds on the shiny black floor every time he shifted his weight. He was wearing his best clothes, a blue jacket over a white shirt and jeans, but he still felt underdressed compared to everyone else in the room. The aliens wore elaborate armor, flowing robes covered in jewels, and ceremonial outfits that seemed to glow with their own light. On his chest, Danny wore a small bronze medal. It hung from a red, white, and blue ribbon, and it was no bigger than a quarter. Compared to the massive decorations and medals that many of the aliens wore, Danny's medal looked like a toy dot. At the far end of the chamber sat Queen Tarxia of the Krell Empire. She was enormous, at least 12 feet tall, with a body covered in dark purple armor that looked like it was part of her skin. She had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and her mouth was filled with mandibles that clicked together when she moved them. 2 massive claws extended from her arms, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. Danny had learned about Queen Tarxia during the trip to the council. She was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, a warrior who had personally led her armies to conquer 12 different star systems. Other species feared her. Some worshipped her. Everyone respected her. Right now, all 4 of her eyes were focused directly on Danny. Danny was not supposed to be here. He was only 12 years old, and children weren't normally brought to Galactic Council meetings. But his mother, Commander Linda Carter, was part of Earth's first official delegation to the Council, and families had been allowed to come along on the historic journey. Danny had been touring the human spaceship when an emergency session was called. Everyone on board was required to attend, including him. He had tried to stay quiet and invisible in the back of the human delegation, standing behind the adult diplomats and military officers. For the first hour of the meeting, it had worked. Nobody paid attention to one human child among all the adults. Then Queen Tarxia had noticed him. Danny wasn't sure what had caught her attention. Maybe it was because he was so much smaller than everyone else. Maybe it was because he had fidgeted at the wrong moment. Or maybe it was the metal on his chest that had reflected light at just the right angle. Whatever the reason, the Queen had stopped in the middle of a speech about trade agreements, turned her massive head, and stared directly at Danny. The entire chamber had gone quiet. "You there?" The Queen's voice boomed across the room, translated instantly into dozens of languages by the computer systems built into the walls. "Human child, come forward." Danny's heart had started pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His mother had put a gentle hand on his shoulder and whispered, "It's okay, honey. Just be respectful and answer her questions." So Danny had walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber, until he stood alone in the center of the room with thousands of aliens watching him. "Closer," the Queen commanded. Danny walked closer, climbing the steps toward the Queen's throne. Each step was huge, designed for beings much larger than humans, and Danny had to use his hands to help pull himself up. Finally, he stood on the platform, still 20 feet away from the Queen, but much closer than before. "That is better," the Queen said. Her 4 eyes moved independently, each one examining Danny from a different angle. "Tell me your name, human child." "Danny Carter, Your Majesty," Danny said. His voice sounded small and thin compared to the Queen's powerful tone, but at least it didn't shake. "Danny Carter," the Queen repeated. "And how old are you?" 12, Your Majesty. "I'll be 13 in 4 months. Around the chamber, Danny heard some aliens making noises that might have been laughter. He wasn't sure why that was funny. The Queen leaned forward slightly, her massive form casting a shadow over Danny. "I have been observing your species since you arrived, young Danny Carter. Humans are new to our council. You have only had the ability to travel between stars for 3 years. Before that, you were confined to your single planet, unaware that millions of other species existed in the galaxy around you." Danny nodded. He knew this already. Everyone on Earth knew it. 3 years ago, humanity had finally invented faster-than-light travel and discovered they were far from alone in the universe. "Your species is weak," the Queen continued, her tone matter-of-fact rather than cruel. "You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no enhanced strength. Your lifespans are short. Your technology is primitive. Many in this council question whether humans deserve a place among us." Danny felt his face get hot, but he kept his mouth shut. His mother had taught him that sometimes the best response was to say nothing at all. "But then I see you," the Queen said, "wearing that medal on your chest. It looks like a military decoration, yet you are clearly not a soldier. You are a child. So I find myself curious." She pointed one massive claw at the bronze circle on Danny's jacket. "Where did you get that medal, young Danny Carter? Did your military give it to you as part of some ceremony? Do humans give medals to children to make them feel special?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Danny felt his face get even hotter. He looked down at the medal, then back up at the Queen. "No, Your Majesty," he said quietly but clearly. "I earned it." The laughter got louder. The Queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Several of the other aliens made sounds that the translation system didn't even try to convert into human language. "Earned it?" The Queen said. "Please, do tell us. What grand achievement did you accomplish to earn such a decoration? Did you win a competition? Did you score well on an examination? Perhaps you ran faster than the other children in your school?" Her tone wasn't exactly mean, but it wasn't kind either. She clearly didn't believe that a human child could have done anything worthy of a real medal. Danny felt something change inside him. He had been nervous before, intimidated by the massive alien Queen and the thousands of beings watching him. But now he felt something else, something steadier. He looked Queen Tarxia directly in the eyes. All 4 of them. "I would like to explain, Your Majesty," he said. "If you'll let me." Something in his voice made the Queen pause. The laughter in the chamber faded. The Queen tilted her head slightly, studying Danny with what might have been curiosity, or might have been something else entirely. "Very well, human child," she said. "Explain to this council what great deed earned you that tiny piece of metal. Tell us your story." She settled back on her throne, her massive claws resting on the arms. "Entertain us." Around the chamber, the thousands of representatives from hundreds of different species got comfortable. They expected a cute story, perhaps a touching tale about some small accomplishment that humans considered important. They expected to be charmed or maybe bored. They had no idea what Danny was about to tell them. Danny took a deep breath, his fingers touching the metal on his chest. The metal was cool under his fingertips, familiar and heavy with memory. "It was 9 months ago," he began. Danny's voice carried across the silent chamber as he began his story. He kept his eyes on Queen Tarxia, but he could feel thousands of other eyes watching him from every direction. "It was a Tuesday morning in Denver, Colorado," Danny said. "That's a city on Earth, in a place called the United States. I was at school, at Lincoln Elementary. It was a normal day, just like any other day." He paused, remembering. Even now, 9 months later, he could still picture every detail of that morning with perfect clarity. "I was in math class, 3rd period. My teacher was Mrs. Peterson, and she was teaching us about fractions. I remember feeling happy because I was finally starting to understand them. Math had always been hard for me, but that day it was making sense. Danny's hands clenched slightly at his sides. Then the alarms started going off. Around the chamber, some of the aliens shifted. The ones from warrior species leaned forward slightly, recognizing the beginning of something serious. At first, we all thought it was just a drill, Danny continued. We had them all the time at school. Fire drills, where we practiced leaving the building quickly. Tornado drills, where we practiced taking cover. Lockdown drills, where we practiced hiding from danger. We were always practicing for emergencies. He swallowed hard. But when Mrs. Peterson looked at her phone, her face went completely white. She looked terrified. She told us this wasn't a drill. She said we needed to hide right now. Queen Tarxia's mandibles clicked softly. What was happening? Someone had come into the school with weapons, Danny said. The words felt heavy in his mouth. 3 men. They had rifles, body armor, and hundreds of bullets. They had blocked all the main exits so nobody could get out. Then they started moving through the building. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the species that had been laughing before were quiet. Mrs. Peterson locked our classroom door and turned off the lights, Danny said. She told all of us to hide behind desks and stay as quiet as possible. There were 23 of us in that room. 23 kids between 10 and 11 years old, and one teacher who was trying to keep us safe. Danny's voice dropped lower. We could hear gunfire from other parts of the school. We could hear people screaming. More alarms were going off. Mrs. Peterson was on her phone, whispering to the emergency services, but we all knew they wouldn't get there in time. The men with guns were moving fast, going from room to room. He looked down at his shoes, then back up. My best friend Kyle was hiding under the desk next to mine. He was crying. A lot of the other kids were crying too. Mrs. Peterson was trying to comfort everyone while also standing in front of the door. Even though we all knew her body wouldn't stop bullets if the men started shooting. The queen leaned forward on her throne. You were trapped. Yes, Your Majesty. And the men with guns were getting closer. We could hear them in the hallway outside our classroom. They were trying doors, and when they found locked ones, they would shoot the locks and go inside. Each time we heard gunshots, we knew they were getting closer to us. Danny's hands were shaking now, but his voice stayed steady. That's when I remembered something. Our classroom had a second door. An old door that used to connect to the classroom next door. But years ago, they put a bookshelf in front of it and covered it with posters. Everyone had forgotten it was there. He saw understanding dawn in the Queen's eyes. Everyone except you. I had found it a few weeks earlier, Danny explained. I dropped my pencil during class, and it rolled behind the bookshelf. When I went to get it, I saw the old door behind there. I didn't think much about it at the time. But when I heard those men coming toward our classroom, I realized the door might be our only chance. Around the chamber, aliens who understood tactics and strategy were nodding their heads or making their species equivalent gestures. I crawled over to Mrs. Peterson and whispered to her about the door, Danny said. Her eyes got wide. She asked me if I was sure, and I told her yes. Then I told her my plan. The Queen's 4 eyes focused intently on Danny. What plan? Danny took a deep breath. I told her that everyone needed to escape through that old door. We would have to move the bookshelf, unlock the door, and get all 23 kids through it quietly and quickly. Then they could go through the empty classroom next door and out a side exit. He paused. But there was a problem. Moving the bookshelf would make noise. Opening the door would make noise. Getting 23 scared kids through would definitely make noise. The men with guns would hear us. They would know what we were doing, and they would come for us before everyone could get out. Queen Tarxia's mandibles clicked slowly. Someone would need to distract them. Yes, Your Majesty. Someone would need to make sure those men were focused on something else. Someone would need to lead them away from our classroom and keep them away long enough for everyone to escape. Danny's jaw tightened. So I told Mrs. Peterson that someone should be me. A murmur went through the chamber. Several aliens made sounds of surprise or disbelief. Mrs. Peterson said no immediately. Danny continued. She said absolutely not, that I was just a child, that it was too dangerous. She said it was her job to protect us, not our job to protect each other. But I wasn't asking for permission. He looked around at the assembled aliens. I was the fastest runner in my grade. I had won every race at field day for 3 years in a row. If anyone could stay ahead of those men long enough, it was me. I was also small, which meant I could fit through spaces adults couldn't. And I knew the school better than they did because I had been going there since I was 5 years old. Danny's voice grew stronger. But most importantly, I was the only one willing to do it. Everyone else was too scared, or too young, or they didn't think of it. Mrs. Peterson wanted to do it herself, but she needed to lead the other kids to safety. It had to be me. The Queen studied him carefully. You were 10 years old. Yes, Your Majesty. My 11th birthday was the next week. Danny smiled sadly. I never thought I would live to see it. What did your teacher say? She kept saying no. She said I was too young, that she couldn't let me do it, that there had to be another way. But we could hear the men getting closer. We were out of time. Danny's voice grew softer. So I told her something my dad used to say. He paused, gathering himself. My dad was a firefighter. He died when I was 8 years old. He went into a burning building to save people who were trapped inside. He got them out, but he didn't make it out himself. Danny touched the medal on his chest. Before he died, he told me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway. He said when you have a chance to help people, you take it. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard. The chamber was so quiet that Danny could hear his own heartbeat. So I didn't wait for Mrs. Peterson to say yes, Danny said. While the men were trying to break down our main door, I went to the window on the opposite side of the classroom. I opened it as loud as I could. I wanted them to hear it. His hands moved unconsciously, as if he was opening that window again. Then I climbed out and dropped to the ground outside. And I started yelling. Queen Tartsia's eyes widened slightly. Yelling? I yelled insults at them. I told them I was a witness, that I had seen their faces, that I was going to tell the police everything. I said whatever I could think of to make them angry, to make them want to chase me instead of going into that classroom. Danny's voice was steady now, matter of fact. And it worked. They heard me. They came to the windows and saw me running. And they forgot all about the classroom. They came after you, the Queen said. All 3 of them, Danny confirmed. They came after me, and I ran. Danny's voice filled the chamber as he described what happened next. Every alien in the vast room was listening now, even the ones who had laughed at him before. I ran toward the gymnasium, Danny said. That was on the opposite side of the school from where my class would be escaping. I wanted to take the men as far away as possible. I could hear them behind me, shouting and shooting. Bullets hit the walls near me. I kept running. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. I was more scared than I had ever been in my entire life. Every second, I thought they would catch me or shoot me. My heart was beating so fast it hurt. But I kept thinking about Kyle and all my other classmates getting out through that hidden door. I just had to give them enough time. Queen Tarxia leaned forward on her throne. Around the chamber, warrior species who understood combat and tactics were completely focused on Danny's words. I ran through the hallways, knocking over trash cans and pushing book carts behind me, Danny continued. Anything to slow them down or block their path. The school hallways were long and had lots of corners. Every time I turned a corner, I would be out of their sight for a few seconds. Those were the only moments I felt safe. He paused, remembering. I ran past the cafeteria, through the library, down the art hallway. I knew the school layout by heart. They didn't. Sometimes I would take turns that doubled back on themselves or led to confusing sections with multiple hallways. I was trying to confuse them, to buy more time. One of the alien delegates, a reptilian creature with scales, spoke up. "How long did you run?" 12 minutes, Danny said. It felt like hours. Every breath burned in my lungs. My legs were hurting. I was getting tired, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, they would catch me. If they caught me, they might go back toward my classroom. He swallowed hard. At one point, I had to hide. I ducked into a supply closet and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a tiny crack so I could see out. The 3 men ran right past me. They were arguing with each other about which way I had gone. Danny's hands clenched at his sides. I could have stayed hidden. I could have just waited there until the police arrived. But if I did that, the men might realize I had tricked them. They might go back toward the classrooms. So when they ran past, I waited 10 seconds. Then I made noise again. "You revealed your position?" The Queen sounded surprised. "Deliberately?" "Yes, Your Majesty." I kicked over some buckets in the closet so they would hear and come back. They did. They came running back, and I took off running again in a different direction. I had to keep them focused on me. Around the chamber, even the predator species looked impressed. They understood prey behavior, and this was not how prey normally acted. The whole time I was running, I was heading toward a specific place, Danny said. The south exit of the school. It was far from my classroom, and I knew if I could get there, I could escape outside. Then the men would have to choose between chasing me outside where people could see them or staying in the school. Either way, my classmates would be safe. His voice dropped, but when I got to the south exit, I found out the door was chained shut from the outside. The men had locked all the exits before they came into the school. I was trapped. The chamber was completely silent. I was in a dead-end hallway, Danny said quietly. Behind me, I could hear the 3 men coming. In front of me was a locked door I couldn't open. On both sides were walls. There was nowhere left to run. He looked up at the Queen. That's when I realized I wasn't going to make it out. Queen Tarxius. 4 eyes were fixed on Danny with an intensity that would have frightened him at the beginning of his story. Now he barely noticed. There was a construction area near the south exit, Danny continued. The school was planning to renovate that section. There were tools, ladders, scaffolding, and equipment. I ran into that area and squeezed through a gap in some metal scaffolding into a room that was being remodeled. He demonstrated with his hands. The gap was small, maybe this wide. I could barely fit through it. The men were too big. They couldn't follow me through the same gap. But they could shoot through it, the Queen said. Yes, Your Majesty. And they did. I heard them discussing their options. One wanted to just keep shooting until they hit me. Another wanted to move the scaffolding out of the way. The third said they should wait because I was just a kid and I would have to come out eventually. Danny's voice was steady now, clinical, as if he was describing something that had happened to someone else. While they were talking, I looked around for anything I could use. There was a nail gun, but it wasn't charged. There were wooden boards, hammers, cans of paint. Nothing that would help me against 3 men with rifles. He started describing what he did next. I made barricades. I stacked everything heavy I could find between me and that gap in the scaffolding. toolboxes, cinder blocks, wooden beams. I made 3 layers. I thought maybe if they shot at me, the barricades might slow down the bullets. "Did you think you would survive?" asked one of the alien delegates. "No," Danny said simply. "I didn't think I would survive. But I thought maybe I could delay them a little longer. Every second I kept them, there was another second my classmates had to get away." He continued his story. "Then I found something useful. There was a large canister of compressed air, the kind used for cleaning computers, but much bigger. Next to it was a lighter someone had left behind. I remembered from science class that compressed air sprays are flammable. Several of the aliens made sounds of understanding. I tested it once, very quickly," Danny said. "I pressed the canister and held the lighter in front of it. The spray caught fire. It wasn't like a real flamethrower, but it was something. It was the only weapon I had." His hands moved as he spoke, as if he was still holding those objects. The men decided to move the scaffolding. I could hear them pulling at it, metal scraping against the concrete floor. I knew I had maybe 30 seconds before they could see me clearly and shoot me. Danny's voice trembled slightly for the first time. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely hold the canister and lighter together. I was so scared. But then I heard something that gave me hope. "What did you hear?" the Queen asked. "Sirens. Police cars, SWAT teams, ambulances. Help had finally arrived. They were outside the school, trying to figure out how to get in safely and where the shooters were located." He took a breath. The men heard the sirens too. One of them said they needed to hurry up and finish what they were doing so they can escape. They pulled away the last piece of scaffolding, and suddenly they could see me. Danny looked around at all the aliens watching him. I was crouched behind my barricade of tools and blocks, holding a spray can and a lighter. I was a 10-year-old kid who weighed maybe 70 pounds. They were 3 grown men with rifles and body armor. His jaw tightened. One of them laughed. He said something like, "Really, kid? That's what you're going to fight us with?" He started to raise his rifle to shoot me. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. "So I did the only thing I could think of," Danny said. "First, I screamed as loud as I possibly could. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted the police outside to hear me and know where we were. Then I flicked the lighter and pressed the canister button." His eyes were distant, seeing that moment again. The spray caught fire and shot across the space between us. It hit the first man right in his face. His beard caught fire. He screamed and dropped his rifle, stumbling backward into the second man. Danny's voice grew stronger. I kept the flame going as long as I could, sweeping it back and forth. The canister started to sputter and run out. The third man got his rifle up and fired at me. The bullet hit the wall next to my head. Then it hit one of the cinder blocks in my barricade. The whole thing started to collapse. He made a throwing motion. I grabbed a hammer and threw it as hard as I ever threw anything in my life. It hit the third man in the knee. He went down, and that's when the windows exploded. Danny paused in his story, and a slight smile crossed his face for the first time since he had begun speaking. "The SWAT team had heard my scream," he said. "They knew exactly where we were. They broke through the windows with flashbang grenades and smoke. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except ringing in my ears. But I felt someone pick me up and carry me." He took a breath. When the smoke cleared, all 3 men were on the ground with their hands tied behind their backs. They weren't a threat anymore. It was over. Queen Tarxia leaned back slightly on her throne. "And you were unharmed?" "Not exactly, Your Majesty," Danny said. "I had cuts on my arms and face from flying debris when the windows broke. I had bruises all over from diving behind things and running into walls. I had breathed in a lot of smoke, and my lungs hurt for weeks afterward. But nothing serious. Nothing that wouldn't heal. He looked down at his feet. The hardest part was the shaking. After it was over, I couldn't stop shaking. The police officer who carried me out said it was adrenaline leaving my body. He said it was normal, but it felt like I would never stop shaking. Around the chamber, many of the aliens were silent. Some of them understood combat and knew about the aftermath of life-threatening situations. What happened to your classmates? The Queen asked quietly. Danny's face brightened. They all made it out safely. Every single one of them. Mrs. Peterson led them through that hidden door, through the empty classroom, and out a side exit while I was leading the men away. All 23 of my classmates escaped without even a scratch. His voice filled with pride. In total, 6 other students from other parts of the school were injured that day, but everyone lived. Nobody died except one of the shooters who had a heart attack after he was arrested. The other 2 are in prison now for the rest of their lives. He swallowed hard. The hardest part was finding out what happened in other classrooms. 2 teachers had been shot protecting their students. They both survived, but they were hurt badly. One of them, Mr. Harrison, was in the hospital for 3 months. The other, Miss Chun, still walks with a cane. Danny's hands clenched. And I learned that I wasn't the only kid who did something that day. A 6th grader named Sophie Martinez had blocked a door with desks and chairs while the shooters tried to break in. A 4th grader named Luis Ramirez had led his entire class out through a window and down a fire escape. A 7th grader named Amy Walsh had helped carry a kindergartner with a broken leg to safety. His voice was firm. Lots of people were heroes that day, Your Majesty. Not just me. The Queen studied him carefully. But you are the one wearing the medal. Yes, Your Majesty. Danny touched the bronze circle on his chest. 6 weeks after it happened, there was a ceremony. The governor of Colorado gave medals to everyone who had helped that day. The teachers, the students, even some of the police officers and EMTs who responded. He looked down at the medal. This is called the Citizens Medal of Valor. They give it to people who aren't soldiers or police, but who risk their lives to save others. My mom didn't want me to accept it. She said I was just a child, that I shouldn't have had to do what I did, that the adults had failed to keep me safe. Danny's voice grew softer. She was right about that last part. The adults did fail. There shouldn't have been men with guns in my school. There shouldn't have been a situation where a 10-year-old kid had to choose between hiding and leading killers away from his friends. It shouldn't have happened. He looked up at the Queen. But it did happen. And when it did, I made a choice. So yes, I took the medal. Not because I wanted recognition or because I thought I was special. I took it for a different reason. What reason? The Queen asked. Because my dad taught me that when you do something hard, something that scares you, you should remember it, Danny said. Not to brag about it, but to remind yourself that you're capable of more than you think. He said heroes aren't people who are born brave. They're people who act brave when it matters, even when they're terrified. Danny's young voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. This medal is heavy, Your Majesty. Not because of what it's made of. It's heavy because of what it represents. It represents the worst day of my life. It represents being more scared than I thought possible. It represents having to make choices that no kid should ever have to make. He stood straighter. But it also represents something else. It represents 23 people who got to go home that day. It represents my friend Kyle, who just started middle school with me. It represents Mrs. Peterson, who still teaches at Lincoln Elementary and who sends me a card every year on my birthday. Danny's eyes swept across the assembled aliens. It represents the fact that when evil came to a place that should have been safe, when bad people with weapons came to hurt children, those children didn't just hide and hope for the best. We fought back. We helped each other. We saved each other. His voice grew stronger with each word. You asked if humans give medals to children to make them feel important. The answer is no. We give medals to people who earn them. And I earned this one, Your Majesty. I earned it by running when I wanted to hide. I earned it by screaming when I wanted to be silent. I earned it by fighting back with a spray can and a lighter when I had no other weapons. Danny looked directly at Queen Tarxia. You said earlier that humans are weak. You said we have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. You're right. We don't have any of those things. Physically, we're one of the weakest species in this galaxy. He touched his medal again. But we're strong in other ways. We're strong enough to run toward danger instead of away from it. We're strong enough to sacrifice ourselves for people we care about. We're strong enough to stand up to monsters, even when we're just children, even when we're terrified, even when we know we probably won't survive. His voice rang out across the chamber. This medal doesn't represent physical strength, Your Majesty. It represents the strength to do what's right, even when everything inside you is screaming to run away. It represents the strength to protect others, even at the cost of your own life. It represents the strength that comes from knowing that some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for. Danny's hands were steady now, no longer shaking. You asked what humans bring to this galactic council, what we offer that others might not. This is it, Your Majesty. This is what we bring. We bring the willingness to stand up when everyone else sits down. We bring the courage to fight impossible battles. We bring the belief that every life matters, that every person is worth saving, even if it costs us everything. The chamber was absolutely silent. Not a single alien moved or made a sound. So yes, Your Majesty, Danny said firmly. I earned this medal. I earned it with 12 minutes of running, with fear so strong I thought I would die from it, with choices no child should have to make. I earned it by leading 3 armed men away from my friends, by fighting back with whatever I could find, by screaming for help when I was trapped. He stood as tall as his 12-year-old body would allow. And I'll wear it every day for the rest of my life, not as a trophy or something to brag about, but as a reminder. A reminder of what happened that day. A reminder of what humans are capable of when it matters most. A reminder that being brave doesn't mean being fearless. It means being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Danny's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone in the chamber could still hear him. That's what this medal means, Your Majesty. That's what it represents. And that's why I earned it. The silence that followed Danny's words was complete and profound. 10,000 beings from 1,000 different worlds sat motionless in the vast chamber. Some of them had been alive for centuries. Some had fought in wars that spanned entire solar systems. Some had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but none of them had expected to hear what they had just heard from a 12-year-old human child. Queen Tarxia remained perfectly still on her throne for a long moment. Her 4 eyes fixed on Danny. Then, slowly she rose to her full height. The movement was significant. In Krull culture, standing from the throne was a gesture of deep respect, reserved only for the most honored guests and the most serious occasions. The queen descended from her platform, her massive form moving with surprising grace. Each step she took echoed through the chamber. Aliens on both sides of the aisle moved back to give her space. She walked until she stood directly in front of Danny, towering over him by more than 8 feet. Danny tilted his head back to look up at her, but he did not step backward. He did not flinch. The queen extended one enormous claw, moving it slowly and carefully. She touched the bronze medal on Danny's chest with the very tip of her claw, so gently that the medal barely moved. I have conquered 12 star systems, the queen said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. I have led armies numbering in the millions. I have fought in battles that lasted for years. I have earned decorations from 100 different conflicts, each one marked with the blood of my enemies and the sacrifice of my warriors." She withdrew her claw and straightened to her full height. "And yet, looking at this small piece of bronze, I find myself humbled." A murmur went through the assembled delegates. Queen Tarsia was known throughout the galaxy as proud, fierce, and unbending. The idea that she could be humbled by anything was shocking. "I have 4 children of my own," the queen continued. "They are trained from birth to be warriors, as is the way of my people. At 10 years old, they begin learning combat, strategy, and the arts of war. They are taught to be strong, to be fearless, to be ruthless in battle." She looked down at Danny. "But I wonder now if I have taught them the wrong lessons. You say that being brave is not about being fearless. You say it is about being afraid and acting anyway. My people have forgotten this truth. We have become so focused on strength that we have forgotten about courage." The queen turned to address the entire chamber. "This human child has reminded us of something important. Strength is not measured only in claws and armor and weapons. True strength is measured in character. True strength is measured in the willingness to sacrifice oneself for others. True strength is measured in standing up for what is right, even when the odds are impossible." She gestured toward Danny. This child was 10 years old when he made his choice. He was unarmed, untrained, and facing 3 killers with military weapons. By any logical calculation, he should have hidden. He should have stayed silent. He should have put his own survival first. The queen's voice grew louder. But he did not. He chose to lead those killers away from his friends, knowing it would probably cost him his life. He chose to fight back with whatever he could find, even when fighting seemed hopeless. He chose to protect others at the cost of his own safety. She looked around at the assembled species. How many of us can say we would make the same choice? How many of us, even with our claws and our armor and our weapons, would have the courage to do what this child did? The chamber remained silent. Nobody answered because nobody could honestly say they would have done the same thing. Queen Tarsia turned back to Danny. "Young Daniel Carter, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize. We laughed at you. We dismissed you. We assumed that because you are young and human, you could not have earned that medal you wear. We were wrong." She placed her massive claw over her chest in a cruel gesture of respect. "You have taught us that we should never judge a being by their size, their species, or their age. You have taught us that heroism can come from the most unexpected places. You have taught us that sometimes the smallest among us can be the bravest." The queen raised her voice so that it filled the entire chamber. "I move that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges that come with such membership. Not because of their technology, not because of their military power, not because of their resources." She looked down at Danny. "But because they have shown us something we have forgotten. They have shown us that true strength comes from within. They have shown us that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. They have shown us that a species willing to sacrifice their own lives to protect each other is a species worthy of respect." The queen turned to face the assembled delegates. "All in favor of granting humanity full council membership, signify in your traditional manner." What happened next was unprecedented in the history of the Galactic Council. Every single delegate from every single species indicated their approval. Some raised claws or appendages. Some made sounds specific to their species. Some glowed with bioluminescence. Some released specific scents or pheromones, but every single one of them voted yes. The queen nodded slowly. "It is unanimous. Humanity is now a full member of the Galactic Council." She looked down at Danny again. "And as for you, young warrior, I would like to offer you something. In my culture, we have a tradition. When we encounter someone who has shown exceptional courage, we offer them a place in our warrior clans. It is the highest honor we can give." The queen lowered her massive head in a bow, something she had never done for any other being in the chamber. "Daniel Carter, you are hereby offered honorary membership in the Royal Guard of the Krell Empire. You will have no duties and no obligations, but you will carry the title for the rest of your life. When people ask how a human child earned such a title, they will be told your story, and they will understand that courage knows no species." Danny's eyes went wide. He had not expected this. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm honored. I really am." The queen straightened up. "Do not thank me. You earned this, just as you earned that medal. I am merely recognizing what is already true." She turned and walked back to her throne, each step purposeful and deliberate. When she reached the platform, she addressed the chamber again. "Let this day be remembered in the histories of all our species. Let it be remembered that we met a human child named Daniel Carter. Let it be remembered that he taught us the true meaning of courage. Let it be remembered that we learned humility from the youngest and smallest among us." Around the chamber, delegates began to rise. One by one, then in groups, they stood in recognition of Danny's story. The reptilian Scarix hissed in approval. The insectoid Vryn clicked their mandibles in respect. The gaseous beings of the Nebula Collective glowed brighter. The ancient elders of Proxima Prime, who rarely showed emotion, inclined their heads. Within minutes, every being in the chamber was standing. 10,000 aliens from 1,000 different worlds, all showing respect to one 12-year-old human boy. Danny stood in the center of it all, tears running down his face, his hand touching the metal on his chest. He had not cried when he was running from the shooters. He had not cried when he was trapped and fighting for his life. He had not cried during the ceremony where he received the medal. But he cried now, overwhelmed by the recognition, by the respect, by the understanding that these beings from across the galaxy had listened to his story and truly heard it. His mother, Commander Linda Carter, was crying too. She stood with the human delegation, watching her son receive the recognition he deserved. Recognition she had always known he deserved, but had never expected the galaxy to understand. As the standing ovation continued, other delegates began to approach Danny, the Vryn ambassador, whose species was known for tactical brilliance, wanted to discuss Danny's improvised strategy. The Scarix warriors offered him honorary status in their hunting packs. The crystalline beings of Theta Station wanted to preserve his story in their memory crystal so it would be remembered forever. Even the predator species, the ones who had initially dismissed humans as weak prey, now looked at Danny with something different in their eyes. Not fear, exactly, but respect. They recognized in him something primal and dangerous. The kind of danger that comes not from claws or teeth, but from an unbreakable spirit. As the session finally began to wind down and delegates started to leave, Danny found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Species he had never met wanted to shake his hand, touch his metal, hear his story again. Some wanted to take his picture. Others wanted to record his voice. A few wanted samples of his DNA to study what made humans capable of such courage. Through it all, Danny remained humble and polite, answering questions and accepting congratulations. But occasionally, his hand would drift to the metal on his chest, touching it as if to remind himself that this was real, that all of this had happened. Finally, as the chamber cleared, Danny and his mother walked back toward the human delegation's quarters. They walked in silence for a while, processing everything that had. "I'm proud of you, honey," his mother said finally. "I was always proud of you, but today I'm even more proud. You showed the entire galaxy what." Danny looked up at her. "I was so scared, Mom, when the Queen Fee